The US national debt has reached an all-time high and is only expected to grow from here. Currently at $30.5 trillion as of July 2022, we sit number 1 on the list of highest in-debt countries, with China coming in second place, having a total outstanding amount less than half that size at $13 trillion. We're quickly becoming more dependent upon external sources like foreign nations who may not want their money unless they need something else. Things like oil products or military service, which does not help reduce our overall debt. Before we get into this one, please make sure you hit that like button if you enjoy these videos and subscribe if you'd like to see more. In today's video, we will go over the national debt, also known as federal debt or government debt, and answer questions like why is the US in so much debt, who do we owe all this money to, and will the debt ever decrease? So without further ado, my name is Makita and let's get right into it. The US national debt is the money owed by the federal government of the United States. This is different than the debt that an individual or family might have. The US national debt consists of money that the US government borrowed from foreign and domestic investors to finance its operations and programs. The US national debt has been increasing for many years, and as of July 2022, it is over $30 trillion. The US government borrows money by selling bonds to investors. A bond is basically an IOU from the US government. The investor lends the US government a certain amount of money, and in return, the US government promises to pay back the loan with interest. The interest on the US national debt is currently about $275 billion per year. This means that the US government has to pay about $275 billion each year just in interest payments on the money it has borrowed. Interest expense for the national debt totaled $562.4 billion in 2021, offset by $210.1 billion in interest and investment income. The interest payments on the US national debt are one of the largest expenses for the US government. The nominal level of national debt in dollars is generally viewed as less critical than its proportion to the country's gross domestic product, or GDP. Typically, government debt as a percent of GDP is used by investors to measure a country's ability to make future payments on its debt, thus affecting the country's borrowing costs and government bond yields. In the long term, the United States gross federal debt to GDP is projected to trend around 138.5% of GDP in 2023 and 139.4% of GDP in 2024, according to our econometric models. So why is the US government borrowing so much money? There are a few reasons. First, the US government spends more money than it takes in through taxes and other revenue sources. This is called a budget deficit. In order to finance its operations, the US government has to borrow money to make up the difference. The US government has always been in debt. Sometimes it's because they were fighting wars like during World War II, when debt skyrocketed due to increases in military spending, and other times the country was just getting started with significant issues such as borrowing money for construction projects or earmarking funds without any idea how much these specific programs would need over time. So there have been periods where we've had more liabilities than assets, but this is nothing new. Throughout our history, people have been touting the national debt. Second, many of the programs and services that the US government provides, such as Social Security and Medicare, cost more than the revenue that they bring in. Third, the US military and defense budget is $770 billion. The US has military bases in over 150 countries and spends more on its military than the following 9 countries combined. The cost of maintaining a large military and presence around the world is very expensive. The national debt has increased by about $8 trillion as a result of overseas wars and military operations launched after the 9/11 attacks, combined with increased domestic security spending. Fourth, the tax cuts enacted by the Bush administration in 2001 to 2003, known as the Economic Growth and Tax Relief Reconciliation Act of 2001 and referred to as the Bush tax cuts. This reduced the amount of revenue that the US government took in. The future of the Bush tax cuts became a central issue in both the 2008 and 2012 presidential campaigns, with John McCain advocating making almost all of the remaining cuts permanent, while President Barack Obama called for extending them only to families earning less than $250,000 per year. But when these reductions were due to expire at the end of 2010 after last being extended by President George W. Bush as a part of an economic recovery plan 2 years earlier, they weren't put into effect immediately, but instead delayed until March 31st of 2011. So Americans will not suddenly see their taxes increase midstream dramatically during what was already considered a great time. So those are some of the reasons why the US government is borrowing money. Now let's take a look at who owns the US national debt. The US national debt is owned by foreign investors, including governments, central banks, and other institutional investors. The largest foreign holder currently of US debt is Japan, which owns about $1.2 trillion of US debt. Other major foreign holders of US debt include China, which owns about $980 billion of US debt, and the United Kingdom is the third most prominent US debt holder at $634 billion. The remaining US national debt is owned by US institutional and individual investors, including pension funds, insurance companies, and mutual funds. In 2001, the US national debt was about $5.8 trillion. By 2009, it had increased to about $11.9 trillion, and as of July 2022, it's currently $30.5 trillion. So if we divide the total amount of outstanding debt by the US population at 329.5 million, this comes out to be $92,564 of debt per person. Now I know what you're thinking, how can I help the US get out of this debt? Well, if you contribute $1 million a day to the government towards paying off the debt, it would only take 83,561 years to pay it off, and you're looking at some serious gains from the interest you will earn on that money. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.